Welcome to the special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show and celebrity interviews live from the Grotto with Greg Hanna. Greg, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing, Neil?
Fantastic. And music is something, Greg, before I even introduce this guest, is something that just is one of your biggest memories in life. I mean, I've just noticed that when we've talked to musicians all the time. It just blows you away because you remember that certain time that song played,
That's
right?
right.
Your life.
Usually you anchor something to that song and it takes you all the way back and you feel it and you smell the sound and you hear the sounds and you think about what you were thinking about back then. It's true. It's true.
All right. Our guest today is drummer Chris Slade. Chris, thanks for stopping by. And we're going to let Greg just hit with the questions and get started. But I mean, the favorite band my favorite band you were in was AC/DC, bottom line. But that's me because I'm just a huge AC/DC fan, probably because of the age of my age, in the 80s, when I really was into
Yep,
AC, really got introduced to AC/DC as a
of course.
teenager type of thing. And then, wow. But go ahead, Greg, with your question.
That's hilarious. Hey, so Chris, did you always want to be a musician?
No, I always wanted to be a drummer.
Explain
So,
the difference.
yeah, well, a musician plays chordal instruments, usually. I don't, I'm afraid. So, writing this album, I use the keyboard player of Timeline, who is Mike Clark, and he helped me enormously putting these songs together because I'd never written melodies before.
Oh, wow. Okay. So talk about why you always want to be a drummer. Who were your favorite drummers growing up?
Buddy Rich, and Tony Williams, another younger than Buddy jazz drummer. Fantastic. He's not with us anymore, unfortunately, but he played with Miles Davis when he was 16, I think.
Wow.
Wow. Did you ever like Led Zeppelin's drummer or Rush
Oh,
or any of
yeah,
those guys?
of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I think Bonham was a fan of Buddy Richards as well,
Yeah.
to be very honest. I'm not certain about those facts, but I'm sure he knows of Buddy and the way he used to play. Um, So, yes, tremendous drummer, Bonham, tremendous.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Um, tell us about your big break. How'd you get started in your fame, AC/DC and
Well,
others and so
I
on?
wanted to be a stand-up comic, but people just laughed at me. So,
It was
no,
good.
I
Neil's still
always
trying
want
to
to be.
figure that one out, but
I get it. I get it. I understand. I get it.
Actually, people just laughed at me when I wanted to be a drummer.
oh,
Um, I was in school. I went to the youth employment people, and they said, what do you sort of, to paraphrase, what are you into? What do you want to do? I said, I want to be a drummer. That's not a real job. You can't get a job, you know, playing drums. It's impossible. And they laughed for at least 2 minutes. Um, so then, I said, no, I really want to be a drummer. So he said, why don't you go and work in a shoe shop, which is very similar to drumming. Um, so I went to this shoe shop, which is in the capital city of Wales, where I'm from, South Wales. And one of the assistants there said, I saw this band last night and they sacked their drummer. You're a drummer, you should try for it. And then, look, they don't want me because they're 25 and I'm, 16. So, but about an hour after that, she told me that the guitarist of the band came in to buy some shoes.
wow.
But I was pretty good at my job, just like Spinal Tap. I'm sorry, sir, we haven't got that size. I was very good at that. Um, so he came in to buy some shoes, and I went up to him, heart in my mouth, because he was like in his 20s and I was 16, as I said. So I went and I probably blurted out, I know you're Mike Roberts, and I know you're with Tommy Scott and the Senators, and you lost your drummer last night, and I'm a drummer. I live by Tom, so which I did. I lived about half a mile from Tommy Woodward, who was Tommy Scott, but of course he became Tom Jones.
Wow.
It's amazing.
So a bit of synchronicity there, whatever you have to call it. And we arranged to meet, and the whole band came to my house where I had my drums set up permanently.
Yep.
Brand new Premier kit. And they said to me, "Can you play Walk Don't Run by the Ventures?" And I rattled that off, just the intro, nothing else, just the intro. And they said, "Okay, let's go to the pub and rehearse."
I
So they
love it.
each grabbed a drum, and we got on the bus. It was about a half a mile walk to the bus stop. Got on the bus, changed buses with the drum kit, and went to the pub to rehearse.
That's
So
great.
that was the start of my musical career.
I love it. Talking about divine intervention and laying the path for you, right? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
geez,
Yeah. And synchronicity has played a big part in my life a lot of the
amazing.
time.
That's
I love that
crazy. And
story.
you think about the amazing people, think about Tom Jones, but then once you became a founding member of Manfred Mann's Earth Band, I mean, I
Yep.
read some of the songs. It's game on for you, right? In your career.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Manfred called me and said, "Are you interested?" I said, "Yes, of course," because Manfred was a big star, certainly through the 60s. They were considered to be like the Beatles. They didn't write, as far as I know, but they had like 21 number one hits, or at least top 10 hits through the 60s. So Manfred was a big star, and he asked me to play drums. He said, "I know a guitarist singer. Do you know a bass player?" Which I did. So Colin Patton became the bass player, and I became the drummer, and Mick Rogers was the guitarist. And that was for 7 years. I was with Tom for 7 years through the 60s. And then I was with Manfred for 7 years through the 70s. I'm seen to be a 7-year cycle, man. that's,
And,
that's the way it is. A lot
and
of things have been
how
7
did
years.
AC/DC come about? How did you get involved there?
I was working with Gary Moore, guitarist Gary Moore, and they had the same management. AC/DC had the same management. A guy called Stuart Young, no relation to Angus and Malcolm Young, just the same name. And he was manager of both, both acts. And I got the chance to audition with AC/DC because of it. I did meet Mal a little bit before because he came to see Gary Moore, and I was playing drums, and we hit it off like a house on fire. Really, we were laughing and joking, and Malcolm wasn't drinking then, and neither was I at that time, or at least I was, but I hadn't had time to have a drink yet. And he was introduced to me by bass player, Australian bass player.
Wow.
Can't think of his name. So he knew Malcolm. And he said, all he said to me was, "Oh, Slade, this is Mal." That's all he said. I'd never seen Mal before. I hadn't seen AC/DC very much. And he didn't say, "This is Mal from AC/DC." They said, we hit it off, Malcolm and I, straight away. Just laughing and joking. So that got me the chance, I think, for audition. And that was arranged, and went to the audition in my car with my kit. And it was an hour from my house. And no pressure. Angus and Mal had 2 chairs and they sat in it playing guitars, and they were 10 feet from my face. So no pressure. And it's like, then it's, okay, Back in Black. You count in. Oh, thanks, guys. All right. Click, 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 gang, gang, you know? And they were so so close to me, I mean, that I think the reason was to see if you'd crack under pressure.
I gotcha.
Because, you know, to me, they were a couple of musicians.
Yeah.
It wasn't in any way intimidating that they were, even at that time, 91, I think, 89, it was.
89. So,
89.
What was the biggest rise of AC/DC, to remind me? You were right there before the big rise, or one of the other big runs when you were with them?
I think the big thing was them writing Thunderstruck. And that has been a huge hit all around the world, more than once. And it's a great song. And there's a lot of really good songs on Razor's Edge album. In fact, we do Razor's Edge on Timeline, do Razor's Edge on stage.
Oh, wow.
We just did it the other day. As I say, a few days ago, 3 days ago, I was in Italy playing it. So I just love being on the road.
There's nothing like the rush of a crowd. That's for sure. Okay, Greg, with your next question.
So I've been doing it all my life, you know.
Get you going, right?
Since absolutely. Yes, it's it's incredible that what you can get from a crowd.
Yeah.
And I suppose in a way it's what I live for. Being up on stage, hitting things.
So, I'm glad you brought up Timeline. So it's been 12 years since you started the Chris Slade Timeline. Tell us about that. Why did you start it? What's it all about?
I wanted a band that could play all my career, not just AC/DC. Don't get me wrong, we do half AC/DC, half the other stuff. So now Manfred Mann's Earth Band, Uriah Heep, David Gilmour, Jimmy Page, that's the other half of the set. But the AC/DC, we have 2 singers. We have the guy who does the AC/DC songs, which is Bun Davis. And the other one who also plays bass is Stevie G. He sings the Earth Band, Uriah Heep, Jimmy Page music.
Wow.
So it's it's a very adaptable band, and the guys, I knew the guys before, and I used to go and see them play pubs and clubs, and in the UK, and I knew they were more than capable of changing from AC/DC to Manfred Mann's Earth Band because they used to do covers like Genesis and Kansas really, really well. So I knew they were more than capable with the singing and everything, harmonies, everything.
Wow.
I knew that they were great musicians. I'd known them for a long time, but I'd checked them out a few times. And it came the point where I said, do you want to do this, guys? Because not all musicians want to play AC/DC and say Tom Jones. They just don't. Oh, I play heavy, man. I'm a heavy player. I can't play that. I can't play Tom Jones. Yeah,
But
okay.
so many.
Well, I can. All right.
Well, so many amazing hits in your band, for sure. Go ahead, Greg. Greg has a final question, Chris, and this question is for him and the listeners and viewers and everyone about what you've learned. But go ahead. Greg, with your question.
Yeah, thanks. It's been so awesome talking to you, Chris. It's been amazing. It's probably my favorite interview all year.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, you're welcome, sir. So tell me, Chris, what do you feel is the most important thing in life you've ever learned?
Whew. Don't take it too seriously. That's the start. Always laugh at yourself, because if you don't, somebody else will. Many things. I'm quite philosophical, actually. I did a lot of meditation. It's I could go on for a long time about that sort of stuff. But
I love
in
it.
the van yesterday, we had an existential discussion about self-determination or fate. We really did. And it's the sort of thing we do. Peace and love, man.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
you see how important, Chris, how important is how you feel every day is your success in life. Because if you can't meditate, you can't be peace filled, you can't enjoy what you're doing, there's no reason of living. And that's the part of life that I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I always wanted to be a drummer all my life. I haven't succeeded yet, but I'm working on it.
I think you have. Where can we check out your album, your latest album? Where can we go?
Brave Words Records. Or you can go on to chrisslade.com, and there's a video and a link up there. I think the Brave Words Records as well. I hope. I haven't had a chance to look yet, because I say we just came back for the weekend. Just got back. And yes, both links are on chrisslade.com. And there's also Chris Slade timeline on Facebook. So that's where most of the things get put up these days. And my missus does it, Christine does it. And she does a great job. She puts all the info up on that. chrisslade.com is a bit slower. I think it's because it's a .com. I don't know. But,
I get it. Well, Chris, we appreciate it. Thanks again, and great fun reminiscing about music.
Our first year of growing in this 60 by 60 plot of land, we grew 2,500 pounds of produce. And this past year, we were able to harvest, with the assistance of all of our community partners, we harvested 18,000 pounds of produce. And that produce went directly to each of our 3 food pantries throughout the summer. I've got a dedicated group of volunteers that are out here in the rain. They're also out here in the summer heat when it's 95 degrees. But gardening is a multi-weather activity. I was able to join this group at SHIM and further my love of gardening and help people at the same time. There's nothing like being able to hand somebody a fresh piece of produce that was picked from the garden within minutes of harvesting.
We're back to the Neil Haley Show. My guest today is Erin McDonald. She's going to talk about Star Trek Prodigy. Erin, thanks for stopping by. And let's talk a little bit about your background before we get into Star Trek Prodigy.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. So I've studied astrophysics. I have a PhD in general relativity and gravitational waves. And for me, I've always been a lover of TV and film. And so I have sort of found ways to integrate pop culture into science.
That's cool. And in that process, how did this whole thing with Star Trek Prodigy get started and stuff?
Yeah. So after I left academia, I started going to conventions to give science talks because I missed teaching so much. and using pop culture to teach things like how artificial gravity in science fiction works or how faster than light travel works. And through those conventions, I met a lot of people in Hollywood and the industry who had friends working on shows. And, this role of science advisor kind of came up for some projects here and there. And I moved out to Los Angeles. I started giving talks at the official Star Trek events, talking about the physics of Star Trek
Wow.
specifically. Yeah. And then I was hired for my first Star Trek science advising job was season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. And then they decided, we have all these other shows in production. Let's have a single point person kind of manage the technology and the science behind all of it. And so Prodigy is one of those shows, and I'm extremely proud of it.
That's really, really cool. And talk about becoming, are you a Trekkie yourself? Is that how it kind of the passion started?
Not from a young age, but I got into it when I was in college, when I was studying my physics degree. There were a lot of Star Trek fans in my class, as one can imagine, and so that's how I started watching it and fell in love. And Star Trek certainly got me through graduate school. I actually dedicated my dissertation to Captain Janeway as a thank you for keeping me going, because anytime I wanted to give up, I would watch Voyager, and she would inspire me to keep going. And so, yeah, I came into it later, but fell hard and fast for Star Trek.
How much do you look at your job specifically enough of looking at science, technology, and the future when it comes to the writing and the effects and everything in Star Trek?
Yeah, Star Trek has a, pretty strong legacy of its own technology that's been around and been grown since the 1960s. So keeping true to a lot of that, I would say the biggest challenge was on Star Trek Discovery when they flash forward to the future. So now not only are we in the 24th century, we're now in the 31st century. And so what does the future look like to the 24th century? And how do we kind of pivot from there? And so that's been a really fun challenge to try to see what that future technology looks like.
Oh, 100%, because the future technology is your biggest uh challenge, because how to define the future, the technology of Star Trek in the 60s. How far ahead have we even caught up to any of it in our technology today?
I mean, we to some extent we have, right? And things like flip phones, right? They use the flip phone communicator thing, and those are a thing of the past now. And video conferencing, what we're doing, that was a technology in Star Trek that seemed far, far in the future. And even things, they had tricorders, the little scanning medical devices. Necessity is the mother of invention, and we've lived through a period where distanced medical assessments are becoming more important. And even just the technology of things like, wrist devices that are able to manage your heartbeat and everything, that's all kind of very future Star Trek like technology. And so there's some stuff that we're continuing to get towards, and then other things that unfortunately we'll probably never see, but we'll keep working on it and dreaming in the process.
So let's talk AI for a second
Okay.
before we jump in, and then we'll get into the Star Trek Prodigy. But it's really interesting to look at Star Trek in the 60s versus today, where there was definitely robotics. So there was AI as well in the 60s for the
Yeah, I mean, they had episodes called like the Ultimate Computer and things where we had evil computers that were running entire planet systems. And yeah, so Star Trek has always played with that technology. And then you flash forward to Next Generation, and you have Data as an android and who is an artificial intelligence. And there's episodes like Measure of a Man that explore Data's autonomy as a artificial intelligence, and is he a human, and does he have choices, and what does that look like? And yeah, I think what is cool is as we have started to progress our machine learning technologies, we often refer back to Star Trek for guidance in how they talk about it and handle it.
So let's look at timelines now. This is always the interesting thing of timelines. In the 60s, what time in the future do you think it was in the 60s for Star Trek? And then you can kind of define all the way up to now Prodigy. And what years do you think it is? And if we were looking at us as a timeline for when that technology would be in place?
Yeah, it's the Star Trek is based on humans from Earth in the Milky Way galaxy, as opposed to a galaxy far, far away. And so there is a straight line that's sort of drawn between who we are now and where we come to. And Star Trek has had time travel episodes where they go back to this era, you know, or we have the Voyage Home film where they come back to the 80s and save the whales and all of that fun stuff. And
Oh
so,
yeah, I remember that now in the movies. I saw more of the movies. I was more of a movie fan of Star Trek than the series.
valid. That's totally fair. And in you know, Star Trek First Contact, where they come back in time to when the first warp drive is developed. And even in that lore, they talk about humanity going through World War III before they develop warp drive. And so, you know, we've got some steps we got to go through
Trifactus
before we get
coming,
that
maybe. Oh
technology.
boy. Yeah.
Exactly. But I think that is cool, and I think that's fun that Star Trek plays with those timelines and shows that, you know, we still are kind of on that track, and it sets an aspiration for us as well to reach for.
As a scientist, you see that as an aspiration, right? Space travel.
Oh, absolutely. I think
Be it interspecies, not just the intergalactic species, not just okay, we're just going to be stuck on Earth forever. You have that.
yeah. I mean, what's cool is, and I think why Star Trek, you know, captured imagination from the beginning as it did was because we are explorers at our heart and we want to go out to the final frontier and keep exploring space and to see what's out there. What I love about space, whether that's through research, through science fiction, through pop culture, whatever, is that it really does capture the imagination of all of humankind. You know, we have a long ancient legacies of looking up at the stars and imagining what's out there. And so Star Trek tries to give a vision for us with that, but that's something that's always going to inspire us.
It's always going to be the fun part, right? Okay. So now
Exactly.
if you go, so you're such a Star Trek expert. We're going to go all the way to Prodigy, if in the timelines of history of Star Trek. First it's Star Trek, then go through it. I don't know it. So that's what I'm asking.
Okay. Well, so in terms of the shows coming out, in the order, we had the original series, then the Next Generation with Picard, and then we had Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and those were in the 90s. And then Star Trek Enterprise flashed back to old time before, that kind of bridged our current space program with what would eventually be Starfleet. It talks about sort of the first voyages that humanity goes off on. So that was Enterprise in the early 2000s. And then a long drought of Star Trek. And we got, in 2009, the films came out with Chris Pine, and they had, we call them the Kelvin timeline films because it was sort of a reboot of the Kirk era. And that captured a lot of Star Trek fans. And then Star Trek Discovery came out, which was set in the past, and then they flashed forward to the future. And then we've had, oh gosh, there's so many Star Trek now. We've had Lower Decks, we've had Picard, we've had Strange New Worlds. I already mentioned Discovery, Prodigy. Upcoming is the Section 31 film, and then we have Starfleet Academy, and they are all over the Star Trek timeline.
All right. You get your star. You know, you are the expert. Now, Prodigy, what type of timeline does that take place using the technology and everything that you want to make sure? Because any Trekkie spots something that's not up, like
Yeah.
technology wise, you're in trouble. So tell me,
Right.
and we'll talk about the show.
Of course. So Prodigy takes place in the Star Trek timeline a little bit after Voyager. So this is sort of the Admiral Janeway concurrent with the Picard era. So it is kind of like a spiritual successor to Star Trek Voyager. A lot of those same characters are there, but we're focusing on kids who are discovering Starfleet for the very first time. So it's really seeing all of this universe through these eyes of someone who's never seen it before. So it's a great entry point into Star Trek, to be honest.
All right. And so let's talk about, without giving anything away, more the premise of the show and all the different things with Prodigy.
Yeah, it's you know, it's an animated show. It's targeted a little towards kids, but I think it's for all ages, really. And it the first couple episodes feel very Star Warsy, very Clone Wars, very action heavy. But then it quickly reminds you that no, we're in a Star Trek universe. So it's almost like Star Wars characters in Star Wars have discovered Starfleet and now they're trying to find it. That's sort of the vibe of it. And it's a bunch of kids who find a Starfleet ship that's been abandoned and they escape their circumstances and start to learn about the ideals of the Federation and Starfleet and decide that they want to go there. They want to go to Earth and they want to go and become Starfleet officers. And so we get to follow them on that journey.
Oh, no. So they're coming from the galaxy to Earth. That's
Yep,
interesting.
pretty much. Yep.
And
Yeah.
are you hoping a little bit of the academics goes into it for kids as well as, targeting more kids with the storylines?
For sure. I mean, as the science advisor, we're not only making sure that like the science they're talking about is correct, but also that we are introducing science in a way that's accessible for all ages. And so we have things like, they get caught in the gravity well of a red giant binary. and we explain that. And we have characters like Hologram Janeway, who's kind of a training mentor for the kids, and she's able to kind of be a proxy teacher to introduce these kids to these concepts. But that's a unique role of mine as the science advisor, is to again, not just make sure the science is right, but that it's presented in a way that's consumable for all ages.
All right. And the importance of STEM and STEAM, right?
Exactly.
Are you consulting with other with districts and stuff, or the United States Department of Education when it comes to some of this?
I mean, I'm an educator at my heart. And so, and I've been a science communicator pretty much my entire professional life. And so reaching out to different age groups and different communities is incredibly important. What I love about Prodigy, and that I think is unique when we talk about a STEM focused show for kids, is that instead of painting a broad brush to say like, oh, we'll just get kids interested in science, we have specific characters who are on their own journey of discovering science. And so kids can see what that looks like on the path to becoming a scientist, and realize that like, you might like biology, you might not like chemistry, or you might love weather, you might be fascinated by the atmosphere, but not really interested in dinosaurs. Like, these are all different scientific fields. And I think what's great is that Prodigy demonstrates that for these kids.
Oh, absolutely. So as a science advisor to the show, what do you go up and look at, and specifically viewing each episode before it's made, making sure it makes sense scientifically?
Yeah, the biggest role that I have, like ground 0.1, if I don't do anything else, the main thing is to make sure that the dialogue is accurate, that we don't say anything wrong that contradicts current science. Everything on top of that is just icing. So if we have plots that are scientifically grounded, what can we do to play with that? I think a big part of my role is to build a scientific backbone for these stories that might not necessarily make it into the explanations in the episode, but when characters will give a single or 2 or 3 lines of dialogue to refer to it, it feels grounded. It feels like there's been some logic and thought put into it. And so that's kind of the space where I live in that role.
That's gotta be cool. But what about, do you do any Trekkie advising too, to make sure that they stick with the Trekkie stuff?
Oh yeah, of course. I have to know how warp drives work, how transporters work, how replicators work,
And if
all of
it's
our fun.
or else the Trekkies will come after you, right?
Oh, 100%. Yes, they will check everything, but it helps that I'm a fan myself. So
Well, I think you're more than a fan. You just nailed all this on the top of your head. You weren't looking at talking points. When are you writing a book about Star Trek? Is that coming?
Well, I did write a baby board book called Star Trek: My First Book of Space, which is out now. It is for 0 to 2-year-olds, and it's all about space, but there's a lot of Star Trek references for the adults in the family. So
That's
it's a
cool.
pretty fun one.
Well, I mean, it's the perfect thing if you go to events, right? You have a
Yeah.
perfect built-in audience. If you're going to write a book and you're going to be in, how many people come to these Star Trek events?
It's
Oh,
amazing how many people show up. I mean, it's thousands and thousands, but you would think that a pure science lecture at this event might not be that well attended, and it is out the door. People love Star Trek and science fiction fans really are scientifically curious people and love the opportunity to meet a scientist. So I have a lot
Now,
of
I want you to go with the war, Star Wars versus Star Trek. I know
Okay.
I'm a huge Star Wars fan.
All
How
right.
much science is right in Star Wars?
Star Wars does not necessarily try to be scientifically accurate, and I think that's fine. It
Do you
is a
think it could be
space
sci-fact at
fantasy.
one point instead of scientifically right? Could it be
Yeah,
sci-fact?
it's internally consistent. There are rules, and the one time Star Wars, I think, tried to introduce a scientific concept to the Force, which was the midichlorians. It didn't really go over very well, so it stays in the science fantasy world, but I love it. I have slightly more Star Trek tattoos than Star Wars tattoos, but it's more than 0, and I did get married in a Princess Leia dress, so
Okay, all right. I'm going to give you that. And I was Darth Vader in a ice bucket challenge. One of my
nice.
TV station asked me to do that with the ice bucket challenge. You have to look it up, Darth Vader ice bucket challenge.
Love it.
But say I'm a legitimate 6'10", so I would have been perfect for a Darth Vader. I love Star Wars. I really would love to watch some of the Star Treks. It's just very interesting. I think that you can grow into that. And if you look at my celebrity interview list, I have a lot of Star Trek stars I've had on. I can't
Yeah.
tell them by the top of my head, but Google search Neil Haley and Star Trek and see which stuff's come up. And there is some pretty interesting names. I did interview the guy that created the Klingon language.
Yeah, Mark Okrand.
Yeah, he
He's
was on. He
great.
was on my show. So
I
yeah,
love
I
it.
see. I can't think of his name, and then you say, "Oh yeah, it comes to my head." I've done over 10,000 interviews, so you got to help me on that. I'm just
Oh,
great at
absolutely.
asking questions. So, where can people watch Prodigy? Where can they go?
It is on Netflix right now, seasons 1 and 2. Go watch it. Go have your kids watch it. It's super fun. Like you said, I mean, for people who maybe haven't ever seen Star Trek but think they might be interested in it, when you're faced with 800 episodes starting in 1960s, it seems like a lot to watch. Start with Prodigy. It's a great entry point, and it's a really fun, sweet, wonderful show.
So, you're into all sci-fi or not?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Hardcore.
Everything?
All sci-fi.
Okay. Did you like Heroes? I was a big fan of
Mhm,
Heroes. I've
mhm.
interviewed a bunch of people in Heroes. I
Oh,
was,
nice. Yeah.
are these, I heard a reboot was coming with that. Who knows? But see, there's a lot of interesting, they got to get content out there. And that's great that I'm going to tell you, if I would rank the best group right now, Netflix would be the one that's starting to really populate new content now for their viewers more than some of the other platforms. I think that they're at least or I'm hoping we're getting more and more content after that strike. I'm sure that was killing you and it was driving you crazy too. So
Yeah.
is there a place people can find info on you, Aaron?
Yeah, I can be found online mostly on Instagram at Dr. Aaron Mac, DRERINMAC. And I have a YouTube channel. If you look up Dr. Aaron Explains the Universe, you can find links to some of my Star Trek science stuff that I've done for Paramount Plus, as well as my own episodes talking about the science and science fiction.
Well, congratulations to your success. You're coming up with something that should make your passion and it's impressive. And think of more and more ways that you can monetize at those Trek conventions. And you never know what's next for you. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you so
Thanks,
much.
Aaron.
Yeah, have a
All
good
right.
one.
You're
Bye.
listening and watching the Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.
All of the produce you see here is distributed at our 3 food pantries every other week on Tuesday at Baldwin Presbyterian Church and every other week on Wednesdays at the Wallace Building in Whitehall and every other Thursday here at the Shim location. The food pantry schedule is on our website and we look forward to seeing you.
Welcome, guys, to the special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show and the Stay On Course podcast. I'm excited to welcome the host of the Stay On Course podcast, Julie Riga. Julie, how are you? And I'm excited about our guest, and we're going to talk about Spirit of Friendship today. How are you, Julie?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited about this interview.
Absolutely. So we're excited to welcome Jeremy London to the program. Jeremy, thanks for stopping by. Spirit of Friendship. it made me definitely think about things. I said this is the week of talking about remembrance and death because of this film, and also I reviewed Running on Empty this week. I had a guest on that's coming out in Lionsgate. So go figure with those two different things. But Jeremy, thanks for stopping by.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, go Julie with your first question.
All right, Jeremy, you've had a career spanning television, film. Tell us a little bit about what drew you to getting into acting.
What drew me to getting into acting? I think that it's just it was in my DNA. I don't think that I ever saw myself doing much else. I think that I wanted to be a psychiatrist and psychologist for a while. But I mean, I just kind of always knew I was going to be, I've just always been an artist, one form or another. I just started doing plays in school, and that led to, connections in the film industry. And I haven't looked back. Now, the problem is I'm 51 now, and I don't really know if I'm qualified for much else. I'm kidding. Actually, I'm an artist, and have an acting school and a gardening business and all kinds of other things. But I'll always be an actor.
Thinking about that, your passion, all those different things in school, acting. Were you in sports and stuff too? And where did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Texas and Oklahoma, back and forth kind of. But I was always a baseball player. I was a catcher for 14 years. But I played football and basketball and golf, and I'm an athlete now. I play disc golf religiously, and so I'm still an athlete. But I blew my leg out. I was made the Texas All-Star baseball team, and in our second game, I blew my hamstring out, and actually I literally barely could walk, and so I started taking drama in high school because of the injury. So the injury actually in sports led to me starting to take drama in school.
Amazing. Jeremy, I mentioned to a couple of my friends that we were interviewing you today, and they were like, oh my gosh, I had the biggest crush on Jeremy London. From Party of Five, Seventh Heaven, Mallrats, all these amazing shows. And tell us, is there something that you did way back in the past, in the heyday, where it was just like the best thing you ever did?
The acting wise?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the most fun I've ever had making a movie is I did a movie I did called Journey to the Center of the Earth, which was a 2-part miniseries I did in Australia and New Zealand in the 90s. And I got to be there for like 4 months.
All right. So The Spirit of Friendship, we had a chance to preview the movie, and it was amazing. By the way, I cried at the end. Neil, did you? I did.
I did not cry,
Good.
but I thought about things.
I'll tell you why I
Good.
cried, and then I want to hear the backstory about why this movie, because my father passed away, and we all have somebody that has passed away, right? And so my whole mantra with people was that although my father's gone, I carry him in my heart, and through that thought, his legacy lives on. And so I've been telling people this for a long time. So that's why I started crying, because this was my message to other people. So I'm just curious, like, how you came across this movie. How did this all get started for you?
Well, they reached out to me, and then I read the script, and I just thought it was very heartening, very sweet story. And the folks that made it are lovely, Danny and his family, and I love Connecticut. I just everything about it was sounded like a very positive thing to be a part of. And we all have those, now I'm a father now, and the idea of leaving my children hurts my heart to think of them missing me because I know we're tight like that, you know what I mean? And so immediately I think of these children that do lose their parents when they're young, and how hard that must be, and that part of it breaks my heart, that aspect of the story, the needing to reach out and communicate with the mom thing is it's just very human. and very real. And you just want so badly for him to
Yeah.
be able to connect with his mom. You know, you want it to happen. You
Yeah,
want
you
this
do want it to
mystical,
happen.
thing to happen, you know.
Absolutely.
And so I think there was a lot of that too, you know. And the reveal is, you know, I think that's not what everybody expected, because
Right.
I full
100%.
expected. I
Right, and I don't
expected
want to
to.
give it away
No,
here
no,
either.
no,
We
no, no,
we don't
no.
want to give
He's
away
not. He's
because
doing a good
I'm
job
not.
of teasing it.
No.
So let's talk about Jeremy. I mean, basically, I think the thing that's the big heartfelt thing is he wants to conjure up his mom, to speak to his mom in more of a magic way, right? And that
Yeah.
the whole process and how it shows friendship too, this movie, in so many
Yeah.
ways.
It's loneliness. I mean, you know, the kiddo's lonely, but so's the older gentleman that lost his wife. You know what I mean? It's that aspect of the reality that we live in is probably, you know, sort of one of the things that scares me the most. I think it's one of the reasons why I'm very glad that I found my person. You know, I don't want to grow old by myself and alone and all of that. But I also know that we get old and we get sick, and sometimes we wind up alone. Whether you know, we don't plan on any of this stuff, you know. But I think that it sort of just plays on that the notion that, you know, we don't have to be alone, you know.
Yeah, that really shows the love story of finding your right person. And so
Yeah.
when you agree, Julie, that
Yeah.
as well.
yeah, it is. It's just the idea of connection is really what it was all about. And the son was
Yeah.
really looking for his father to connect with him and to allow him to have that memory of his mother, to be connected
Right.
to her, even if it wasn't that he wasn't able to really speak to her. The Leonard character really helped bring back that idea that you can still have those moments and remember them and keep them close to your heart, because as time goes on, they're always connected to you if you remember them in your heart. And so that's the beauty of the whole entire movie, which I just really loved. I cried. I really did cry at the end. I just sat there, and sometimes I get like this ugly crying thing because I had this great relationship with my father and I lost him as an older person, but you still always have those parents, you know, right with you, because you can still hear their voices, you know.
Well, I'm glad to know that the movie moved you in
Yeah, it did. It did. Totally did. And I think that it will help people heal from loss. I think that's the
Good.
most important thing, is that, you know, we don't talk about this enough. And that's the beauty of this movie, that if you're going through a loss and that you've had somebody close to you die, that you don't have to let them go completely. You can keep them alive in your heart. And that is the story of the movie. And that is the spirit of friendship.
It is. It is. You know,
And
I
I
think
think that's
Danny's got a good heart.
Yeah.
The filmmaker's got a good heart. He's a sweet
Yeah.
guy. He's an empathetic guy, you know. And so he made a sweet movie, which doesn't get made very often anymore. People are, you know, trying to go for the big bucks with making horror films or sexually related movies, just things that are just, you know, a dime a dozen, you know. So I think that he kind of took a risk in making such a sweet film, because, you know, it's a very targeted audience. You know, not a lot of people like to consume wholesome things. It's nice to be a part of wholesome things every now and then.
I agree.
You know?
I agree.
Totally. So what are the projects you have going on right now?
Right now, I don't have anything going on. I just finished a couple of films. I've got a movie about to come out called Boneface, that I'm busy being grandpa to this one right now.
Ah.
And my son's here for the summer, so I kind of take the summers off mostly. But I paint a lot. You can see some of my art in the background there. I do a lot of painting, so I mostly paint. I'm mostly an artist these days. I sell a lot of paintings, and so I paint a lot, and then I make movies in the interim, and I still teach online, London Arts Acting School, and when COVID hit, we started a garden in our backyard that has now turned into a food forest. And so we started a company where we make pepper jelly called London's Most Wanted. pepper jelly, and you can find us on Etsy. It's got some of my art and other things that we make at London's Most Wanted on Etsy. And so, I'm just trying to do a lot of things that I would not be able to do if I was in Los Angeles. But it's, also I found my person. I found my person here in Mississippi. So I'm able to do all these. I'm able to thrive and do all these things that are life-giving to me.
Well, and that's exactly important. And you found your person, you found your passion and a point, and you continue to do what you love, and you can choose and pick and choose. Especially like you said, there's not much going in the summer, and we know a lot of projects are finally going to come back, hopefully in the fall, with new projects because of the next strike that you guys dealt with, but you're getting there.
Yes.
And at least that's gotten hopefully finished. But
Yeah.
but I really like that, with the product, your opportunity, you have a huge fan base that you can jump and grab to, that people who love Jeremy London and want to, remember him from those specific areas. And do you ever do the Comic Cons? Do you do those sometimes?
Oh yeah, all the time.
That's the best place. It's crazy how people like from the Little House on the Prairie and all that, they just live off of that all the time. And then that's their gigs.
Yeah. Brian O'Halloran from Clerks, my buddy, my in the View Askew world, my Mallrats buddy. He makes probably 99% of his money from conventions. So they're a good stream of revenue for actors.
So whenever you do it, you take your jelly, you get a QR code, put it on your phone, and then everyone will go buy that when you do the next autograph session.
Oh, it's impossible to haul around jelly. So I have cards that I send people. If you want to try it, there's a QR code. Find us. We'll ship it to you.
Everyone is a big fan of yours. We appreciate you coming by. Again,
Thank you.
it's the movie will be out in August. Appreciate it, Jeremy. Thanks again, Julie. And that was a special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show and the Stay On Course podcast, guys. Take care.